It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Odo's redecorating with help from Kira. Becoming a changeling again, or perhaps more accurately having the lock on it removed, means his humanoid furniture is no longer required. A call from Dax brings them to Ops as we're getting an odd signal from the Gamma Quadrant. It's a cardigan message, but an encoded one, and not of a type that either of them recognize, so Odo finally suggests our resident expert on such things might know more. Plain simple Garak joins Bashir and Zial after being consulted to share the news. He was able to open the message, though everybody was disappointed to learn that it was just a planetary survey from years ago. Bashir wondered if it might be connected with the joint Cardigan-Romulan fleet that went off to do a genocide a while back, only for plain simple Garak to respond he's given up hope on that. Odd then that he's breaking into a mega shuttle later, but not so odd that Bashir didn't expect it. Plain simple Garak giving up didn't feel quite right to Bashir, especially when one of those lost was his mentor in Tain. Plain simple Garak knows when he's rumbled, or perhaps wants to reward Bashir for working it out, and admits the message was more than he claimed. In fact, it was a call for help from Tain himself. That's worth involving Cisco, and after confirming the message as much as we can, he agrees taking a look might not be a bad idea and thinks plain simple Garak should have company. If he was hoping for a leisurely flight with his favourite twink, he's shit out of luck, as Cisco's sending Worf instead. Still, maybe the fair doctor is less on his mind these days, as he's been spending rather a lot of time with Zial. The two have become close, and he promises to return, a promise Zial's dad doesn't care for. Seagull do cuts on the station, and seeing what's happening, it gets a bit handsy with plain simple Garak. Quark's able to break it up with a threat to fetch Odo, and plain simple Garak buggers off after a final barb. The quality time Seagull do cut had hoped to spend with his daughter while here for an unexpected layover may not be as pleasant as he'd hoped. As Worf and plain simple Garak pop over to the Gamma Quadrant, with the latter annoying the piss out of the former for giggles, Seagull do cut is catching up with Kira. He's unimpressed with her letting Zial associate with plain simple Garak after she was left under Kira's care. For her part, Kira tells him to go fuck himself. She took in Zial for Zial's sake, and any judgment from Seagull do cut is worth less than her last shit. He stomps off with a vague threat that she also doesn't care about. To the mega shuttle once more, where Worf's hitting the brakes. Tracking our mystery signal has shown the source is in Dominion territory, and Cisco told him to avoid contact. Quite how he expected this to work when Tain was last seen getting shot at by the Jem'Hadar is unknown, but let's ignore that for now. Plain simple Garak intends to ignore it as well, and suggests we continue whilst avoiding contact by nipping into some handy space fog. In his defence, it is a good place to hide. So good, in fact, that the Dominion were already using it to hide a significant fleet, one that Worf thinks bodes very poorly for Deep Space Nine. We try to call back to let them know about a potential invasion force, but can't tell if it's getting through. That ceases to be our problem when we're stopped by a tractor beam and some Jem'Hadar teleport over to conduct a bit of percussive diplomacy. Back on the station, enough of Worf's message has got through to understand the meaning, especially when taken in combination with us losing contact with some probes in the Gamma Quadrant. Cisco alerts Starfleet and prepares while sending Kira through in the Defiant to take a peek. The result of her trip is so disturbing that everybody forgets to use those holographic communicators we installed in the last episode. There's some good news elsewhere, at least, as Worf and plain simple Garak are still alive. They're being held by some Jem'Hadar on an asteroid prison, though one they're free to explore. When all the external doors open onto vacuum, there's not much reason to keep people locked up. We're not the only guests here either, as we found the real General Martok, husband of Cirella. His founder copy may have been murderized by us at the start of the season, but it would appear they kept the original around after copying him. Martok, husband of Cirella, might be a bit dented from his experience, but in Tain's had things worse. His heart's on the way out apparently, though he still has enough vitality to chide plain simple Garak for getting himself and Worf caught. Whilst a tad ungrateful, you've got to admit that he has a point about rescue missions that don't rescue anybody being completely bloody worthless. An incoming Dominion fleet is obviously a very bad thing, and one that directly affects Cardassia as the closest major power, so Sisko's invited Seagull Ducat to our Starfleet-mandated middle management meeting. Not that they can do much about it. The Cardigan fleet is all kinds of fucked up from the Klingon invasion, and help from Starfleet's going to be a couple of days away at best. That's why Sisko wants to destroy the wormhole. Having the emissary of the prophets blow up their temple is obviously somewhat concerning for Kira, but he thinks it can be closed without damaging the entities inside. As to such a closure breaking the spiritual link to Bashir, well, they're gods, right? They'll find a way to sort it. At this point, Bashir can choose between their gods and their continued existence. Of course, this will also trap both Worf and Plain Simple Garak on the other side, but that's good news for at least one of the people present at the meeting. To the prison once more, where Martok, husband of Sorella, is explaining that Tain was able to use old gubbins in the structure of the building to create a transmitter. We're interrupted by a Romulan who says someone's being released back into the general population. Both Worf and Plain Simple Garak are obviously a little surprised to discover it's Bashir. A blood test would likely be more reassuring if we didn't know the Founders had ways around it now, but it's the best we've got. He says he was taken over a month back on his way to DS9 from a conference and woke up here, a similar story to how Martok, husband of Sorella, was taken. All of which means our Bashir may have been a Founder for a while, and that makes it doubly important to get the bloody hell out of here and let people know. Maybe they're panicking over nothing. Doppel Bashir is visiting Ops, where Dax and O'Brien are working on doing a science to the wormhole to close it, and he's even brought sandwiches. Maybe he likes it better here than the Great Link and is switching sides. Not everybody is so positive, and Seagull Ducat is being told by Zial that she has no intention of leaving DS9, despite the incoming fleet. Part of it's not being accepted on Cardassia, something he says will change soon, but the rest is Plain Simple Garak. Trying to pull rank on his own daughter doesn't work, so he curses her instead and leaves alone. There's a departure due at the prison asteroid too, as Martok, husband of Sorella, says Tain is not long for this world. Plain Simple Garak goes to him and finds Tain knows it too, as he asks Plain Simple Garak to promise to escape once he's gone. Plain Simple Garak agrees on the condition that the request come from him not as a mentor, but as the father he was never able to acknowledge being. The moment of bonding is as brief as it is final, and Tain carks it. Plain Simple Garak's not one for sentimentality though, at least not with an audience, so it's time to go, and Worf agrees. They're out of time. Back on Deep Space Nine, we're firing our science wibbly to close the wormhole, and we're leaving it late too, as the fleet is just a couple of minutes away. The station poops triple yellow at the wormhole, though not for long. A kaboom in Ops brings things to a halt, with O'Brien saying the reason is sabotage. Finding out who becomes of secondary importance when our Dominion fleet finally arrives, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with them, as we're told our story is to be continued. It's the return of recurring characters, though not for long with one of them. Tain, previously thought lost towards the end of Season 3 when he led a joint force to go and murderize the Founders, pops up one final time. Many excuse to get Plain Simple Garak involved in things is one I'm here for, and more so when we get a snippet of backstory to boot. We've known for a while that Tain was fond of Plain Simple Garak after taking him as a protege, but now we have an explanation that it goes beyond a mere recognition of talent. Discovering that Plain Simple Garak is Tain's son also clarifies the severity of the latter being responsible for the former's exile, and goes some way to explaining Plain Simple Garak's insistence on making amends for the unknown betrayal. Speaking of which, is that betrayal possibly related to the 3 questionably fictitious stories given during the Season 2 episode, The Wire? A destroyed transport doesn't sound like something Tain would give a shit about, but releasing Bajoran prisoners might do it, not for the act itself, but the display of weakness. Tain was already taking a significant risk by allowing his secret son to be so close. Finding out that Plain Simple Garak set some kids free might have been enough to convince him the risk was too great. Or maybe the display reminded him of his own weakness towards his son, and that prompted him to use it as an excuse for exile. Nobody likes to be reminded of their own vulnerabilities, and that would be multiplied 1,000-fold for someone with so many enemies. Even so, it seems a bit much, doesn't it? Tain wanted plain simple Garak to live a long and miserable life contemplating what he did, or at least that's what he said when he gave Bashir the way to heal him. Could that now be reframed as misdirection, though, given this additional data, the whole thing played out to mask his compassion behind a continuing punishment? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither, and Tain was just keeping a valuable asset alive. You don't spend 20 years as the head of the Obsidian Order without being a complete bastard, hence wanting plain simple Garak to live for the purpose of revenge. Or maybe that was yet another attempt to hide his compassion behind a facade, and he just wanted his son to live. Taking that thought a step further, is it possible Inarbran Tain suspected his secret had become known, and he thought publicly exiling plain simple Garak was both the best way to deflect suspicion and keep his son safe? This is one of the reasons why I like plain simple Garak as much as I do. A man so steeped in mystery and scheming gives you the room for some great thought experiments. Inarbran Tain's not the only high-ranking official we found on the Alcatraz asteroid, though, is he? Martok, husband of Cirella, was assumed dead after we discovered the version we knew was a spy and murderized him. Not so, as he's instead spent a couple of years here getting the shit kicked out of him for giggles. Keeping at least one prisoner of each species you intend to conquer makes sense, I suppose, if only to see what kills them the most effectively, hence the Romulan and the Breen, and indeed the human. Dr. Julian Bashir's been here for about a month, he says, which doesn't really help us when Deep Space Nine has a habit of bouncing around with regards to timelines. What does help narrow things down is the change in uniform, though, as Prisoner Bashir is wearing the old one, which means he either uses it when he's off duty, or he was taken prior to the events of 4 episodes ago in The Rapture. That raises a whole raft of questions for the actions of Bashir back on the station, not least of which because one of those intervening episodes involved another changeling, but let's ignore that for now. What's of more importance is that the swap means Federation checks for founder infiltration have either become somewhat lax, or they just don't work anymore. That might be connected to the debacle back on Earth last season, where a few Starfleet lads tried to use it all as an excuse to do some treason. I can certainly see a civilian population not tolerating checks now, but Deep Space Nine is the closest semi-Starfleet, semi-defensive outpost to the wormhole, so I think it's fair to expect something here. Bashir managing to stay undetected for a month at the least is very troubling indeed, especially after the business with fake Martok, fake husband of Cirella, at the start of the year. Half a season after confirmation from the Klingons that blood tests don't work, and our best and brightest still haven't got a viable alternative. If there's a single criticism with the episode, then it's that nobody on Bajor got a say about what a Bajoran station does to a wormhole in Bajoran space. I'll grant you that's an exercise in wishful thinking for an episode that barely has any fat to trim and make space, but ignoring the diplomatic repercussions of that is an absence that I think is felt. We heard the process was going to take 36 hours to complete, which is more than enough time for the usual suspects on Bajor to make some noise. A single line about how Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag, is opposed to the idea but willing to follow the emissary's lead would have covered both the hole and Kai Sin's arse. That being said, I fully admit it's a minor point for an otherwise very solid showing. The story we've been building up to for years is finally starting to kick off, and it's very clear those behind the scenes knew just how important it was to get this right. End of episode.
How are you feeling?
Like me brain's been filled with broken glass.
I think we can safely rule out virtual reality as an interface option then.
I'd probably knock all this on the head if it wasn't in the pursuit of delicious, delicious Pringles.
Still aiming for that sponsorship, I see.
We all need goals, lad.
Well, that goal is proving significantly more difficult than we'd anticipated. Direct control of this old operating system is off the cards, as is voice recognition and now virtual reality interfaces.
That's a bit of a ball ache, I'll grant you, but worth it for the wondrous bounty of mechanically formed paste containing ever so slightly less than 50% potato.
Laying it on a bit thick, aren't we?
There's no room for subtlety on YouTube.
Anyway, getting out of here to nick them might be a problem.
Go on then.
What do you mean?
You do this bit when you found a possible solution, but you want to build up how difficult things are before revealing it.
Sigh. Getting out might be a problem, but I may have a possible solution. I've been looking through records of previous Starfleet exploits, and the guy who played Murdoch in the A-Team built a brainial interface a few years back.
Sounds promising. How'd that work out for him?
Why don't I tell you after we try it? Woof.